Hello, it's your girl T, and I wanted to start off by saying a huge thank you to everyone who showed me so much love on my last Kellogg's workshop vlog. Not only did people take the time to write such lovely and supportive comments, which meant so much to me, but so many of you became new subscribers, which, welcome! There's so many of you. It was definitely the wake-up call I needed to realize that I could start making art videos, which makes a lot of sense since it's pretty much all I do with the rest of my spare time. So here's a speed paint of a recent study I did and some tips that I guess I wish I knew before I started getting into digital art properly. I hope you enjoy! Oh, and all the information like programs and brushes and stuff I use will be in the description. Let's get into it! So to start, I have my sketches all done and laid out. That's just a preference so that I know where everything is before I start coloring. The first thing I'll do is lay down my flat color. I prefer taking a silhouetted approach because it's just going to get alpha locked anyway, and this is the quickest way to do it. But there are other people who prefer to do it by sections, so all of the skin areas are one color and all of the clothing is another. It's all up to preferences, there's no right or wrong way about it. Then I will adjust the color that I've laid down because oftentimes I haven't picked exactly what color I'm after. Once it's all colored in, I can tell. Like this one's a bit too orange, so I'll change it to be something a little bit more neutral and in line with the color palette that I see in the reference. And then once I'm ready, I'll just start painting in the rendering section by section. So I'll start with all of the skin areas in the top half. The first thing that you want to keep in mind is try and keep your reference small or the same size, and don't get bogged down in all of the details that you can't find. What I mean by that is you're practicing the ability to interpret information from a reference, not replicate it. I think in this entire recording, I don't zoom into the reference once because I'm not interested in replicating this picture pixel by pixel. It's more important to try and interpret the information that you can see and try to translate it over into what you're making. That way, you're learning the skill of being able to not only understand what you are looking at, but also recreate it with your own skill set. I think I also only use one brush in this entire coloring. It's just the round brush, or I think it's the round render brush, but they're very similar. And I just adjust the size and opacity if I need, but don't overthink texture, brushes, and everything like that. It's all possible just with the most basic tools, as long as you don't hyperfixate on small details that will just overcomplicate things for you and overwhelm you from the beginning. Focus more on laying down colors and shapes where you see them and trying to understand what that means. It also helps to keep your overall painting style consistent, because if your entire approach to this is very gestural, that's the style you tend to go for, and then all of a sudden in one small area like the hand, it becomes really detailed and photorealistic, it can also throw off the balance of your piece really quickly when you've done a really great job in both areas. So try and stay consistent with the approach that you have taken, which I recommend is a little bit more loose and a little bit more relaxed. Now, it's been a while since I painted clothes. I actually, in this specific one, remember starting it and thinking, wow, I forgot how hard clothes were to paint. So try not to be overwhelmed from the get-go. Understand that you can break all of this down into sections, and you don't have to be super detailed. The human brain is actually really, really good at inferring and filling in gaps. So if you indicate roughly where you can see shadows and shapes from the reference, the brain will sort of understand what it's trying to look at on its own. Don't try and replicate every single crease that you see. Look at the reference and try and understand, what exactly am I seeing? What shapes can I find? How is the light hitting the subject and what impact does it have on what I'm looking at? And then try and apply that to what you're making. And the viewer's brain is going to be able to take that in. And again, when I say viewer, this is for practice, so the viewer is you. But if you wanted to show, someone else, they're going to be able to understand it, and they're going to be looking at the whole picture, not just scrutinizing the clothing on your subject. So it's okay to not have it perfect per practice. If anything, try and learn from what you're experiencing as you're trying to get this right. The next thing is, I would recommend trying to zoom out from your canvas regularly, because when you're in the depth of it and in the trenches fighting for your life, it's not gonna look like anything, especially when you're doing something like clothing. It's very easy to start lamenting and feeling futile, but I promise you, when you zoom out, it's gonna be really easy to spot errors in perspective and proportion, and it's like a reset and to refresh yourself before you go back in again. I also promise that when you zoom out, it's gonna look better than you think it is, because when you're deep in it, it's never easy to be able to tell if you're headed in the right direction or not. But when you zoom out, you're gonna be able to see how everything works together, what you need to change, and you're gonna feel a lot better about the trajectory of what you're working on. The next tip is similar to what you might have heard around drawing, which is draw what you see, not what you think you see. And it is to pick the color that you see, not what you think you see. If you don't have any foundations in color theory and you're working on rendering, I strongly recommend watching some videos. There's some great ones out there. Reading up online, there's a lot of material, because it's one of my weakest areas, and improvement in this area, I believe, is so critical to seeing improvement in your rendering practices more than anything else. So when you're practicing rendering, try and lean into your color theory knowledge or learnings, and don't try to just copy the color that you see, but also think about why that color is the color that you see. So for example, if you're looking at a shadow, but the shadow is quite warm, or there's a tinge of pink to it, think about why that might be. Where is the potentially bounced or diffused light coming from? Where might the source of the saturation be coming from? And that way, next time when you draw something or paint something in a similar position and you don't have a reference even, it's going to be a lot easier for you to rationalize, I've seen this kind of thing before, I know this kind of color will go here. I mean, not to say I have the skill down pat, I'm still working on it. I'm much better at just finding the color that it is and drawing it without thinking too hard, but that's one of the most important skills you can have when it comes to painting especially. So for example, when I'm painting the thigh, I have to think about, okay, not only what colors can I see, but what shapes are there? How is the light hitting them? What colors, therefore, should I be applying with that in mind, knowing what kinds of colors do we usually find in shadow, desaturated, all this stuff, right? Having a firm grasp of the foundations in color is what's going to allow you to push and break those rules in controlled and intentional ways so that your art can look more dynamic and purposeful. The last tip I have is, even though I said in the beginning to not sweat the small stuff, you do still have to think about the small details, at least the ones that really matter. So there's a Chinese saying that's 画龙点睛, and it describes the story where someone paints a dragon, but the dragon doesn't come to life until you paint the eyes. And it's basically the idea of a finishing touch. So for this painting, I believe the finishing touches are obviously the rim lighting and the bounced light that you see, so the red glow from what's likely a red ground that's bouncing the light. But I also, at one point zoomed out, felt that my picture was really flat, and I figured out that it was because I didn't draw in the shadows between the socks and the shorts and then the body, and that made a really big difference, I think, in terms of dimensionality in the drawing, apart from just the other things that you see. So when you're doing your rendering and you feel like you're done, think about what that finishing touch might be for your painting, because sometimes it can make a huge difference. I think that's all the time we have for today, but I hope this was helpful to you if you're trying to get started or working on your rendering practice. And if you have any tips that I didn't mention or any questions that I didn't cover, please let me know below. Let us all grow together. And I would also love to make more art content. So if there's anything specific that you would like to see, please let me know your ideas as well. And maybe there'll be a video in the future for you. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!